Morning, America! How we doing today? I'm in the pickup, and I'm over here south of Ogallala, Kansas. Let's see. Ogallala, Nebraska. Ogallala is Ogallala, Kansas. I'm going to go with Ogallala, Kansas. Might be Ogallala. Anyway, just south of Ogallala, I'm taking south on 149 or 147, Highway 147, southbound here. And I'm going to go show you my grandpa's old ranch where he grew up. If you remember back a few weeks, a couple months ago actually now, a couple months ago I did the video about my dad's home out in western Kansas, that old barn, that old stone house. So that was where my dad grew up as a kid. I'm going to show you where my grandpa grew up as a kid. So, with that said, I wanted to point out, I'm real surprised. I get to talking to some people sometimes, you know, and I'll ask him, you know, well, that's kind of an odd last name. What is that? Is that Swedish or Dutch or you know, Italian or Russian, or you know, what's your heritage? I don't know. People don't know. I'm really surprised about that, you know. And I figured, you know, I grew up in a home that everybody kind of knew. My mom was German. My grandpa was actually born in Germany, and he immigrated to America in the 20s, I think, and came across Ellis Island. And my grandma, she was actually born in America, but her mom and dad, my great grandma and great grandpa on my mother's side of the family, they were both born in Germany. So my grandma is 100% German. My dad, or my grandpa, was 100% German, born in Germany. Okay, so my mom is 100% German, born here in America. My dad, on the other hand, we're American way back, way back, pre-revolutionary times, I think. This little story today is going to be about my dad and his father and his father and his father and his father, my surname heritage, okay? But if you get off on some of the married in names, my grandma, my dad's mother, if you get off on her family, her dad, my dad's mother's dad's mother's dad's side of the family, you know, it's way off in some branch. If you go back far enough, I am the 7 times here. Great grandson of Daniel Boone. So, and I'm surprised that people don't know their heritage any better than that. You know, I've always kind of pondered that. You know, you don't know anything about your background. You know. Anyway, this is my family tree, my heritage. So here we go. Well, that's it. Isn't that pretty out there? My Lord, it's beautiful out here. Just a big open valley down through here. It's all lush and green. Up here's higher plains area and kind of a open grasslands, I guess. And this is where all the water was. This is actually the Smoky Hill River basin. Okay, Smoky Hill River is right down here in the bottom, and that's where they had their farm set up. Now, all right, we're going to go back in history a little bit here. My great-great-great-grandfather, Thomas, okay, It says he was born in 1803 to 1881. So he was, what, 78 years old when he died. Okay, he was from Ohio or Kentucky. They're not quite sure on where he was born. And then his son, Thomas he lived most of his life up in Iowa, okay? And up there somewhere close to Dubuque somewhere, okay? Then his son, Marion, his oldest son, Marion, he was born in Ohio, lived in Iowa all those years. He's the one that finally moved everybody out to Kansas, okay? This would have been prairie schooner days. I don't know, they weren't the original settlers that came out here, but they came along later on, I guess, and they bought this land down in through here. Well, it wasn't exactly this land. It's pretty close to this land. I'm off just a little bit here, but follow me. Okay, but they bought this valley right here on the Smoky Hill River. Okay, and they had a farm, you know, raised crops and livestock, but mostly the biggest part of their existence or their income was breeding horses. You remember the old TV series Lonesome Dove? It was a mini series. Tommy Lee Jones and Robert Duvall, and Robert Duvall was Gus. And if you remember in the movie, in that series, Gus had a sweetheart, Jessica's, what was her name? Jessica Lange? Forget now. But anyway, Gus's sweetheart, she gave up on Gus and she moved to Ogallala, Nebraska, and was married to a horse breeder, horse raiser. And this guy bred horses and raised horses for the U.S. military, the Army, okay? Well, wouldn't you know, my grandpa, George, did the same thing. Marion moved him out here. They started a farm up and everything, and then they got George. He came along in 1871. He was born in 1871 and died in 1926. So when George was a young man, this would be my great-grandfather, when he was a young man, he was living in this valley, breeding and raising horses with his father, Marion, and selling them to the U.S. Cavalry, for cavalry horses and for just draft horses for pulling wagons. They didn't have trucks and stuff like that back then. So anyway, that's my dad's side history. Okay, now with George, they owned this area down here. Actually, they didn't own this area right here. What they owned was right over there. While we're driving over there, I got to thinking I'd tell you some stories about old Grandpa George. My Grandpa George, great-grandpa George, he shot the sheriff. I shot the sheriff. Anyway, yeah, he shot the sheriff. You'd think he'd go to jail for that, right? Nope. Story goes, they had this house out here, and it's this house we're going to visit now, and they had a smokehouse out back, and they got to noticing that some meats were missing. A ham was gone, or some bacon or whatever. Some, you know, meats were gone, and they couldn't figure out where it was going. So Grandpa George, he hangs out there one night. He gets a shotgun, and fills it full of rock salt, and sits out underneath a tree under a bush somewhere and waits. Sure enough, around midnight, somebody comes riding up on a horse, gets off, walks over to the smokehouse, opens it up, goes in, comes back out, he's got a ham over his shoulder or something. Kablooey! Boom! Ah, the guy jumps on his horse and runs back into town. So the next day, now you can imagine, this is the Old West, and you can imagine Gunsmoke. Remember Matt Dillon and Gunsmoke? So, he goes... He gets up the next day and goes into town, going to find out, you know, what the story was. What, you know, there's going to be some news. Somebody got shot last night, so there's going to be some news running around town. So he gets up and goes to town, finds out how all the scuttlebutt was, somebody shot the sheriff last night. George, yeah, that was me. He'd been stealing my ham. So yeah, my grandpa George, he had that story. My dad would tell that many times, and so they got rid of the sheriff. So anyway, George also he died, and everybody, back then, you didn't call 911 and the ambulance didn't show up. We're out here in the wilderness, out in the prairie. So he died, and they laid him out on the kitchen table, the dining room table. They laid him out like, awake kind of thing, right? And they go into town to get the new sheriff and the undertaker. The sheriff to say that, he had died and everything, and there was no foul play or whatnot. And I think I got to go this way. So anyway, he says he goes out there to they run to town. The whole family, they go to town to get the sheriff and the undertaker. And when they get back, Grandpa George is sitting on the front porch, and he's mad. Why ain't the chores done? So apparently he had some kind of, they didn't know back then, but we kind of understand today. I think he had some kind of like a diabetic coma, maybe something like that, but they thought he was dead. They laid him out and went to town, come back. He said, old Grandpa George was mad. So yeah, anyway, he had some pretty good stories. My dad had some pretty good stories about his grandfather, be my great grandfather George. Yep, that's it. The ranch is no more. It's underwater. Back in 1925, I believe it was, Grandpa George found some more ranch land out west, out by Monument, Kansas, which is where my dad grew up. Remember my father's house video? Okay. He found that ranch land out there and decided to buy that. And he was going to move the whole family out there. Well, he gets the land bought out there, and then shortly thereafter, he dies. Well, okay, now what are they going to do? They got Emma, George's wife, my great-grandmother. She doesn't know how to run a ranch by herself, but the oldest son knows, okay? So he can run the ranch. So Emma and my grandpa's oldest brother, I don't know his name. Anyway, he left, and the younger kids, but I forgot to tell you, George was a prolific man. Emma was a staunch woman. 14 kids. Wow. So 14 kids. My grandpa was right in the middle. He was, I think, number 8 of 14. He was number 8, I think. And so anyway, the oldest brother and Emma, they packed up, and the younger kids, 9 through 14, they all moved to Monument and made a go of it out there. The second oldest, all the way down to to my grandpa. Now, my grandpa would have been about 12 years old about that time, and my grandpa, he stayed with the older brothers, but not the oldest brother. The oldest brother went to Monument, and all the other brothers up to my grandpa, they all stayed around here, and there were some daughters in there. They got married off and everything, but the second and third oldest brothers, they were old enough, they had their own families by then. So my grandpa moved in with them, and all the rest of them moved out to Monument. So they get out there, and they moved out there in 1926, built that stone building. I don't know what all happened, all the story behind that, but anyway, then the Depression comes along in 1930s, and they lose it all. Okay, they lost all of them. My great grandma Emma and my grandpa's oldest brother, my great uncle something, I don't know his name, and all the youngest kids, they all lose the farm. The bank repos it or something. So looks like they're having fun out there. So anyway, they repo the farm and everything, and they kind of get scattered around, I guess. I don't know what happened to everybody after that. And then my grandpa, of course, he's still living here on the ranch that's down in this basin, in this valley here. And 1926 came along. They'd only been here for, after Emma and all the younger kids left. My grandpa's sitting around there, and they said, we just can't afford to feed you anymore. It's just the times are too tough, and we just can't afford to feed you. So they told my grandpa, the train comes through at noon, hitch a ride and get on it. So my grandpa basically became a hobo. My dad's father, he became a hobo. I don't know if it was an actual train hobo traveling the tracks and all that, with the sack, the knapsack on a stick. I don't think he was that kind of a hobo. But he left home when he was 13 years old. They says, we can't afford to feed you no more. Hit the road. 13 years old, he's out on his own. So that was my grandpa. Okay, so we got all kinds of little stories like that. I don't want to make this video too long, but but this is it. This is the ranch. What happened was they ended up selling the ranch or lost it or something in the Depression. I don't know the story and the history behind that. Nobody seems to know exactly what happened, because my grandpa moved off and my grandpa ended up with the farm out by Monument. That's how the bank repoed it, and then somebody owned it, an investor. I don't know, some rich farmer. I don't know. Maybe the banker himself owned it. I don't know. But my grandpa, he went out there and actually rented that house when my dad was growing up in it. They rented that house from somebody, whoever the landlord was at the time. And my grandpa made a go of it and just didn't have the funds and the means and everything, and it didn't go. They lived there for about 10 years, I think, and they finally had to give up, and they moved back to eastern Kansas, and that's where my dad met my mom in high school. And then I come along in the early 60s, and so I guess the rest is history. But anyway, that's a little quick rundown of my family. Let me see if I'm missing anything here. Oh, the reservoir. They actually put the reservoir in 1949. They started building it in 1949. So when my grandpa was a kid growing up out here, this lake wasn't here yet, and the ranch was still going. So like I said, I don't know what happened to the ranch afterwards, who lost it, who sold it, who still owned it. I don't know. Maybe they still owned one of the kids, or my grandpa's cousin or something like that. Maybe they owned it, and I don't know. But anyway, that's a little bit of history on my family, and I'm trying to think what else is there. Oh, I got to show you something else. We'll be right back. I don't know how many times I drove by this place in the last few weeks. I've been running Kirk's product down to Wichita every week for almost 3 weeks now. And I drive by this thing every day. And Wilcox School District 29, Trego County. It's a one-room schoolhouse. I was sitting there talking to my mom and dad about this, and they were telling me the history so I could learn about this so I could tell you guys. And I'm like, the schoolhouse, and they go, yeah, there's a schoolhouse right by the highway there. It's a stone schoolhouse. And they were thinking it was over on Highway 147. And we got to looking a little bit more, and I said, well, there's one right on 283, just straight south of Waukene there. And he goes, yeah, that'd be it. So I showed him a picture of it. He goes, yep, that's it. That's where your grandpa went to school. My grandpa, Earl, the one that lived in the house out in Monument, he went to school here. So it's all locked up, and the windows all have, message boards or information boards on them about, like in a museum or something. Yeah, but it's a heritage site or whatever, it's a historical kind of thing. One-room schoolhouse. This is where my grandpa went to school. And I drove by this. I made a video about the post rock and the church and all the buildings. I I took a picture of this. I stopped and took a picture of this building for that video, and had no idea. So it's amazing, you know. Your history is right there, and you don't know it, you know. But anyway, I got one more surprise for you, so let's go. You remember when, now when I started this video, I was kind of dogging on people, not dogging, but you know, I was kind of amazed that people don't know their heritage any better than they do. You know, I'd ask somebody, you know, what's your family history? I don't know. Well, where's your family from? Are they from, you know, old Europe, or are they, you know, Native American, or, you know, and I don't know. I'm surprised that so many people don't know their heritage. And, you know, I'm not trying to dog on anybody or nothing like that, but it does seem odd that people don't know their backgrounds any better than they do. Well, I'm going to, get off me, fly. I'm going to have to back up on that a little bit, because about 3 weeks ago, I'm driving down this road. Oh, there goes a pickup right now. On the other side of that wall is old Highway 40, and I drove right down this road on my way up to Weed Harvest. And the interstate had been closed down, so I had to get off, and I was running down the old Highway 40 here, and I drive right by here. And right there is my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother. Did not know. I know now. So let's go visit. So that's it. Kind of a weird journey, wasn't it? I start trying to tell a story about a fence post and why they would make a fence out of stone, or a fence post out of stone. Why wouldn't they just go to the local store and buy a fence post and put it in? Well, they didn't have a store. So, you know, I'm learning all about this stuff, and it's just weird how I learned about the fence post. That led me to learn about the Volga Germans, which led me to learn about the church, you know, the cathedral. And then I learned the history of the Volga Germans and about Catherine the Great, you know, and a little bit of Russian history. You know, I learned where the Volga River is. I was like, okay, the Volga River is in Germany. No, it's in Russia. So, okay, so I mean, it all kind of ties together, I think. I hope you enjoyed this. I tried to make a simple video about a fence post, and it just kept building and building and building. And next thing you know, I'm finding out all kinds of stuff about my grandpa that I didn't know, stuff about my great-grandpa that I didn't know, things I kind of knew, I just didn't know the details of. So anyway, it's history. It's fascinating to put all the pieces and the puzzles together. It's really neat. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. These are the kind of videos I hope to be making someday, and we'll see you down the road. Take care. Ciao.